friends, I welcome you all on my channel, The Opinion Platform. We have all seen that international politics is not good, it is not going in a peaceful direction. We know that Gaza is under attack. Israel has been committing genocide. Even so many times, the ceasefire resolution has been passed in UN, but Israel is not ready to listen to the resolution and follow the resolution passed in UN. Iran recently attacked on Israel, and the expectation, it is being widely talked, that the conflict of Israel, Palestine, Gaza, and the intervention of Iran into Israel-Palestine war might trigger the Third World War. However, if we see the situation of wars in the Middle East versus Western countries, it has been going on for quite a long time. At times, the charges are leveled against Middle East countries of Islamophobia, rising Islamophobia. On the other hand, Muslim countries, and especially the intellectuals who work on Middle East, have been blaming over Western traditions, that Western countries are always trying to interfere in the personal matters and life, and they want to dominate somehow in their personal sphere. To speak on all such issues, we have here Professor Amir Ali, who teaches political science in the Center for Political Studies and has written quite many books, and his books are very popular. Professor Amir Ali is no unknown name in the field of politics and international politics. Before I ask any question, I would like to welcome him. Sir, I welcome you on my channel, The Opinion Platform.
Thank you, pleasure.
So my first question to you is that how do you see this attack of Israel over Palestine in the name of fighting Islamic terrorism of Hamas?
The first thing that I've noted about this, and this is a certain message that has constantly been kind of put forward by Israel and reproduced by a very compliant, subservient Western media, is as if it all began on October 7th. Of course, the October 7th attacks by Hamas were horrendous, were an example of something that should not have happened in terms of the civilian deaths. But history did not begin on October 7th. If we just go back one day, October 6th, in the West Bank, a 19-year-old Palestinian student was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. This is a conflict that has been going on for quite some time. Now, the root cause of this conflict is the illegal Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This is one of the longest military occupations of recent times. As far as I understand the conflict, this is the root of the problem. It is not terrorism at all. This idea that terrorism is exclusive to the Palestinians, I think, is one of those falsities that has been systematically spread by the Israelis, and as I keep saying, has been subserviently reproduced by the Western media. I'll give an example of what I mean. The way that terrorism is used exclusively for the Palestinians neglects the fact that in the year 1948, when the Oxford English Dictionary defined the word terrorism, it referred to the Zionists of Palestine as terrorists. Organizations like the Haganah, the Irgun Zweil Yumi, the Stern Gang. These terrorist groups later on became what is referred to as the Israeli Defense Forces. So the point is, terrorism is not exclusive to the Palestinians. Before the creation of Israel, there were significant acts of terrorism that resulted in the creation of Israel. And I think it's historically important to understand this point. I find it very unfortunate that in media discourses, media reportage, this is never mentioned. That's what I would like to say about the lack of historical perspective that is often used in this conflict.
Popularly, it is talked about that Israel too has the right to exist. Jews too have the right to exist on this earth, and the kind of attack the Jews have been going over centuries, not just a matter of 100 years ago, in fact even previous centuries, and it is said that Jews have had several kingdoms, and several times they have to face the displacement as a community, as a minority community in most of the places. Israel too has the right to exist, and Middle Eastern countries do not want Jews to live peacefully. What would you like?
Well, I mean, absolutely, that's a point that we have to accept, that Israel certainly has the right to exist, but the Jews have been a people who have been tormented and troubled and tyrannized, especially in the 20th century, the Nazi Holocaust being only one example of the most obvious and glaring example. So yes, I'm not one of those people who would say that Israel does not have the right to exist. It certainly does. The problem arises when Israel does not accept borders. The idea of Eretz Israel, Great Israel. A two-state solution can only happen when Israel accepts that these are where my borders end. That's something that is not happening. As the 6 months of this war has advanced, there has been a kind of continuous illegal annexation of land in the West Bank. And I think that is a problem that people need to address. So two things. Firstly, the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It must be ended. And Israel must be able to declare to the international community that these are where the country's borders end. And only then will we have the possibility of a two-state solution. Having said that, it is with great distress that I note that the possibility of a two-state solution is being eliminated by the actions of the Netanyahu government. I've started believing that it is perhaps may no longer be feasible to have a two-state solution. And I think the reason for that is the kind of continuous belligerence that one has seen on the part of Israel. That's how I would understand this, the existence of Israel. Israel, as I keep saying, must be able to demarcate and declare to the world these are the borders of the state of Israel. It's something it has singularly failed to do.
After the attack of Hamas on October 7, when Israel started to attack Gaza with the commitment to wipe out from the surface of the earth that Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken
Hamas,
in his wiping out Hamas from Gaza, that is what Benjamin said. Do you think since October 7 this war has been going on, and it's the April, today is April, and October, November, December, 6 months, brutal attack is happening. Thousands of children, newborn babies, they were also brutally murdered. UN has been passing resolution after resolution to at least establish ceasefire. Israel is committed not to let any Gaza aid pass through their borders and channels. In fact, America and Britain, they have been sending their aids for the Palestinians, but Israel, violating all the international standards of peace, is saying that unless we wipe out the Hamas, will not stop. Why it took for Iran 6 months to decide to intervene? Do you see the recent Iran attack that it is on behalf of or in the name of fighting in solidarity with Gaza or Palestine?
So there's a lot to unpack in that question, so let me go to the first part of the question.
Yeah.
The idea that Hamas can be obliterated and wiped out of existence is a falsity. The Israelis can't do it. And the Israelis know that they can't do it. The reason why this war is being prolonged in this way is Benjamin Netanyahu's compulsion of staying on. He's riding a tiger. When someone rides a tiger, you can't get off. Everyone knows that when you get off a tiger, the tiger will eat you. It's all about Mr. Netanyahu's political. That's one thing. Secondly, this absurd idea that every single aspect of Hamas will be wiped out. It cannot happen. The more the Israelis bomb Gaza in the way that they have been doing, the more that the support for Hamas will grow. Also, again, something that in the popular media is not talked about. It neglects the fact that the Israelis were instrumental in encouraging the creation of Hamas back in 1987 to undercut the PLO. So if Hamas is a terrible organization in the perspective of the Israelis have no one but themselves to blame for the creation of Hamas back in the mid-1980s. Every time I watch debates on television, I am amazed that this simple historical fact is not talked about as much as it should be talked about. In terms of wiping out Hamas, it just means the continuous obliteration of the civilian population. 30 years ago, when the Rwanda genocide happened, 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda. Tutsis were killed. There was no cable television. At least in India, there was no cable television. There was no internet. A lot of people were naive enough to believe that it is lack of information as a result of which genocide happened. Today, we are witnessing a genocide that is being live streamed into people's devices and televisions, and yet the world stands by and is singularly unable to prevent this from happening. This is a matter of great shame. I think somewhere people across the world have lost themselves where their humanity is, because it's clearly not the Security Council where America has continuously vetoed resolutions. Just last night, they vetoed another resolution calling for full statehood of Palestinians. 6-7 hours after that, the Israelis then launch attacks on the Iranian city of Isfahan. So this is the situation that we have right now. It's appalling. It is. There is no word to describe how bad the situation is. We basically run out of words in terms of describing how atrocious, how appalling, how bad the situation is right now.
About Iran.
Well, Iran has basically operated through its proxy, which is Hezbollah, in terms of operating from southern Lebanon and setting rocket fire into northern Israel. The significant element to note here is that famous distinction of the Shia-Sunni world, the Hamas being part of Sunni Islam, Iranians being Shia Islam. But what one does notice is that there are significant sections of Sunni Muslim population that are supporting the Palestinian cause, the Iranians being one of them, and the Houthis of Yemen the other one. So Iran has quite often been consistent in support for the Palestinians. I can only say that at least there is one set of people willing to speak in favor of the Palestinians when the world has so cravenly submitted to the Israeli aggression. I mean, the West is not going to talk about it. In India, we have seen complete radio silence on it, which is very unfortunate given our historical support for Palestine. We have seen people in Western capitals demonstrating against their governments, but governments being obstinate in terms of their support for Israel. That's how I see at least Iran is speaking up for the Palestinians, and that is significant.
Iran has not for the first time been counted as the leader of Islamic terrorism. It is large, even if we follow the Indian media, the way discussions happen around Israel-Palestine debate and the intervention of Iran and the Khamenei's leadership and how the right-wing fundamentalism was promoted after the Iranian Revolution took place. How do you see the moment Iran intervenes or releases even a single statement in favor of Palestine or Gaza or the people suffering in Gaza, children being killed, civilians being killed, immediately US jumps in, and the Biden, who was being seen as an alternative to the Donald Trump, who was known to be very absolutely right-wing and unbelievable, harsh, at least in terms of speaking. Crude, you can say. Crude. And how do you see Biden in respect of this whole war? Biden is not less crude than Donald Trump, it seems.
Major disappointment. Biden has been a major disappointment. I think I was wrong to be naively optimistic when Trump was displaced with power.
You too were under that.
I think now I realize the mistake that I had. I said I was being naively optimistic in terms of a Biden presidency. The first few years were good in the sense that there was a lot of spending activity that was going on, the Inflation Reduction Act, for example. But this war has exposed the duplicity of the Americans in a way that is unbelievable to actually watch. A lot of it has been explained in terms of the influence and the power of the American-Israeli public affairs AIPAC, and Biden throughout his political career has been beholden to that particular political lobby. The Biden presidency, I think, will go down in history as one of the worst tragedies. It came with so much promise in terms of having displaced the crudity of Trump, as we call it. But what we have witnessed in terms of the gruesomeness of Biden, I don't think history will ever forgive Biden for this lack of moral fiber that he has shown, and the duplicity and the hypocrisy in the way that he's kind of cravenly submitted to the Israelis. Sometimes, I mean, when I talk to my friends, we often joke by saying, which is the client state here? Is Israel a client state of the Americans, or are the Americans a client state of the Israelis? And the way the Americans have been behaving by accepting every single aspect of what the Israelis have been doing, it's almost seems as if they're kind of craven clients of this Israeli regime, the far-right Israeli regime of Benjamin Netanyahu. It's going to be a very bad historical verdict for Biden. That's all I can say.
The way we see suddenly the coverage of news in Indian media, whereas the matters of covering the international news come, Indian media is quite reticent on that. There's hardly any international news in our local channels, local media, and even the YouTubers, so to speak. But the moment Israel attacks come, the news about Israel attacking Palestine, Gaza, suddenly there's a blast of news covering even in Indian media. How do you see this tendency? Why so much of Israel and the Palestine war coverage is happening?
Over the years, I have noticed in India strange admiration for Israel in terms of Israel's scientific achievements, its fight against terrorism. And all that I can say is that this popular perception that exists in India is historically very misinformed. It does not understand that Israel is an example of a settler colonial project. That the state of Israel was created through the power that the British exercised when they were the mandatory power, and the baton of support to Israel was handed over to the Americans. So it's a historically misinformed perspective. All those people who are expressing great admiration for Israel perhaps do not know a single thing about the history of that particular region. It's a very troubled history. In addition to that, I see a very significant anti-Muslim hysteria in terms of this. Because the Israelis are doing all these nasty things to the Palestinians over Muslims, that's why there's a certain kind of almost a kind of a sadistic delight in terms of this. I think it's very unfortunate to see this kind of support for Israel. Having said that, let me also say that it's not just Muslims who are Palestinians. There's a significant Christian component to the Palestinian population. One of the most eloquent spokespersons on behalf of the Palestinian cause was the late great scholar Edward Said. But I have a very low view of the Indian middle class in terms of its intellectual ability, and I don't think most people would know who Edward Said was. So that's how I would look at this strange support for Israel. It's historically misinformed, it's insular, does not seem to know much about global politics.
I don't know whether would you prefer to speak on the question that I'm going to ask or not, but since I have a question, I'm going to ask you. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji, has not given or conducted or called for any single press conference to speak on the matters what the government is doing for the people of the country. But when the question of speaking on the international issues come, Prime Minister unhesitatingly speaks in the favor of the most powerful, the most supreme, and claim that India has become equal, parallel, and globally recognized. It was widely condemned that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken in favor of Israel when the Israel started attacking Gaza and Palestine. What do you want to say?
I'll just say two things. Firstly, there should have been a press conference. The fact that it hasn't happened is an indicator of how bad the state of our democracy is. Secondly, on the question of this leadership of the Global South, I do not see India assuming leadership of the Global South. If there is one country that has the right to claim legitimate leadership of the Global South, it's South Africa. In the way that South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice on the charges of genocide, the fact that on that judgment on the 26th of January 2024, the International Court of Justice, and I think a majority ruling, 16-2, basically said that there's a plausible case for genocide. So, I mean, if one really wants to talk about the Global South, as it's called, leadership of the Global South, what the South Africans have been doing is a tremendous example of that leadership. It's not happening in India. That's all I can say.
Do you think that recent attack of Iran would be taken as a kind of a moment to instigate the Third World War?
Unfortunately, yes. I think that things are now spiraling out of control, that we are now moving towards a World War-like situation. There are two reasons why I'm saying this. Firstly, global capitalism clearly is not working. It's completely dysfunctional, neoliberal capitalism. The kind of inequalities that it's created in our country and across the world are inequalities that are simply unsustainable. And when you have these unsustainable levels of equality, generally a war-like situation. So that's one thing that I want to say. In addition to that, in conversations that I've been having, especially with my students of late, I go back to an interview that the German writer Günter Grass gave just before he died. It's exactly 9 years ago when he died. He gave an interview to the Spanish newspaper El País, if I remember correctly. And he said that the world is sleepwalking into World War III, and that's exactly what's happening. It's a very sad thing to say. I hope I'm wrong. But I have this feeling that the situation in the world is getting worse day by day. And the fact that the Israelis attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus, that the Iranians launched attacks from their soil, 300 missile and drone attacks on Saturday night, and that to this morning the Israelis launched missile attacks on the Iranian city of Isfahan, to my mind is an indicator of a larger widening of the conflict in the Middle East, and it's likely to spread into something like a world war. The only optimistic thing that I can say, it's difficult to find optimism in a situation of this kind, is that once this turbulence has sorted itself out, hopefully we will see the emergence and the birth of a new world order. Hopefully a world order where you have genuine democracy, you have equality, where you have dignity for the most oppressed. Because what we see right now is the most oppressed being subjugated even further. Quite often world orders, when they change, there's a remarkable degree of turbulence that happens. You go back to, let's say, the 1930s, and I think we are reliving something like the 1930s. immediately before the Second World War. After the Second World War, you had a certain phase of, I wouldn't call it, it wasn't great, but there was a certain kind of capitalism that was created that did work for some sections of the working class, where you had real wages increasing Keynesianism. I think what Keynes did was, through his interventions, his academic interventions, political interventions, that he saved capitalism from its worst instincts. I think we need a kind of a Keynesian imagination today that does not save capitalism from itself, but saves the people from capitalism. That's the kind of world order that we all need to envision and think about. And I'm sure that there are thinking minds out there, young people, anguished by the situation that we have, people like yourself, who I hope can put their heads together and create a genuinely peaceful world, because that is exactly what we need.
Last question I would like to ask today's interview. India is in for the General Assembly 2024. Today was the first phase voting. It might be either it would have concluded or will conclude maybe after half an hour or 1 hour or so. Do you think Middle East conflicts will have any direct bearing in our Indian politics, or will it affect Indian General Assembly election?
That's a tough question. I don't think so. I think that it'll affect politics in, let's say, America or England or Europe. But it's very strange that there's a strange insularity to Indian politics, as you yourself mentioned, that we have never really looked at global politics. Well, that's maybe because we're such a big country. I don't think it'll have much effect. From what I've been reading from surveys, the main issues are the cost of living crisis, inflation, unemployment. Economically, things are getting desperate for people. I hope that those are the issues that get reflected in the electoral verdict, because it's very unfortunate that the real genuine issues that trouble people in their everyday lives don't get reflected. That quite often Indian elections have been about waves, and when waves happen, the genuine elections are subdued under those waves. If those genuine concerns were to come up, perhaps a meaningful verdict would emerge. If that doesn't happen, it will be another sorry state of affairs.
Friends, we were hearing Professor Amir Ali, and who has spoken quite clearly that the way situation is spiraling in Middle East, the way conflict is not being put to control in Israel and Palestine, and the Iran intervenes, and the way US is not US does not look interested even to stop war between Israel and Palestine. The way innocent people are being killed, and it is affecting the commonsensical perspective of peace, global peace that we used to have. Let us see, as Professor has said, that the world is moving slowly towards the Third World War. We don't know what will unfold tomorrow, but as far as the situation of the Iran, Israel and Palestine is concerned, there must have been an international discussion, international politics, not just to show that there is a sense of internationalism which is preserved through UN or any such organization. I think an entire new set of people require in the leadership across the world. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much that you have spared your precious time. If you like my channel, please subscribe it, like it and share. Thank you very much.